Hello there, how are you doing? I hope all is well with you. Now I'm here to talk about something relevant to Hong Kong. I know there's a lot going on in the world, but finally we have a big development in Hong Kong, and that is the Protection of Critical Infrastructure Computer Systems Bill. It was announced just before Christmas. I've talked about it. I gave a talk about it just before I went on holiday. And whilst I was on holiday, I was sitting on a bus and the news came on the 19th of March. It's passed. It is not enforced yet. It won't be enforced till the 1st of January 2026. I'm like a decade behind. That's terrible. And it is the most important data protection law I think we've had in Hong Kong for it's probably the only real data protection law we've had in Hong Kong for a very, very long time. The thing we had before was the personal data privacy ordinance, which essentially was very much a pre-GDPR data law looking after personal data. Frankly, toothless, probably not worth the paper it's written on these days compared to things like the GDPR or indeed China's own laws. China passed a number of laws a few years ago. A cybersecurity law, which is very similar to the critical infrastructure bill that's just passed. It had a data security law and it had a personal information protection law, really bringing China into the mainstream or the state of the art in terms of how data is protected across the world. It's very GDPR similar. But Hong Kong had none of that. And we were in this weird position for a while where if you were transferring data, well, we still kind of are in it, but it's been relaxed. Where if data is being transferred from China to Hong Kong, it's very hard to get it over the board and various hoops you had to jump through. Now that's not necessarily going to change, but what is going to change is that if you are a critical infrastructure provider, if you're responsible for critical systems here in Hong Kong, and we don't know exactly what they're going to be, we've got a good idea. Essentially, there's going to be two categories. Then you're going to have to comply with some pretty strict requirements or face some fines of up to 5 million, which may seem quite low in the world of the GDPR or indeed the world of the Chinese data laws, but is far more than anything we've really had in Hong Kong before. And that's on top, essentially, of what you may also get from regulators within your designated industry. Now, the bill, soon to be law, protects two types of infrastructure. We've got type 1 critical infrastructure, and that's something that's essential to the continuous provision of any essential service in Hong Kong. So again, power companies, water companies, I'd say internet companies, quite frankly, that's pretty much essential. Banks, definitely in Hong Kong, hospitals, anything that could bring those down, essentially it would be protected. And a type 2 one, which is a bit more vague, which refers to anything that if there was a loss of data, loss of functionality, it could somehow harm societal or economic activities here in Hong Kong. Examples that we've been given are things like sports parks and stadiums. I was recently at the new Kai Tak Stadium here, this massive stadium for the rugby sevens. If that went down, it would be harmful to Hong Kong. We wouldn't be all starving. Maybe football players and rugby players would be, but it would be damage. So those are the two categories. So if you're responsible for some of those, you're going to be regulated. And who are you going to be regulated by? Well, first we will have a new commissioner who'll be looking just after critical infrastructure, similar to the personal data privacy commissioner that we have. But hopefully with more powers, well definitely with more powers, having read through the new law, but also two designated authorities, and more designated authorities could be named in the future as well. These are essentially industry regulators who will then have the power to impose obligations and come after you if something has gone wrong. These are, at the moment, the first they will be the Communications Authority, which is the telecoms regulator, but regulators a bit more than that, and also the Monetary Authority, Hong Kong Monetary Authority, showing very, very clearly that communications and indeed finance are going to be key to what is seen as critical infrastructure. Now, the powers of these regulated and designated authorities are quite large. I mean, certainly bigger than anything we've really seen in Hong Kong before. They have the power to require you to conduct drills, to inspect your facilities, to ask you to answer questions if you're managing one of these facilities. They also have the power to start investigations, the power to essentially introduce sanctions against you, and well, not sanctions, I've got Donald Trump on the brain on that one, but essentially penalties if your system's not up to scratch. If you are asked questions and you don't respond to them, you could get into trouble. If you have a data breach, and I'll come to that in a moment, you can get into even more trouble, particularly if you don't say them. And this is what's important, they don't tell them about them. And this is one of the things that's most key to this factor, is that for the first time, we have a data breach reporting requirement where not only is it a short period of time, but the penalty for non-compliance is at least going to scare people a bit. If I was if I was in a critical infrastructure organisation, someone who would be designated as such at the moment, and I was in charge of their IT, I would be worried. So if you have a critical failure within your operation, within your computer systems, and you're operating a critical and something that's been designated as critical infrastructure, then you can face penalties if you do not report it within 12 hours. 12 hours is a big deal. 12 hours is not very long in the event of a data breach. But if you don't report, if you don't notify, then you can face penalties. For less serious penalties, the limit could be up to 48 hours. That is still also very, very short period of time. Think about GDPR, think about 72 hours has often been the mainstay. For critical infrastructure, you need to report straight away. There's a lot to be done. If you are responsible for what you think will be critical infrastructure, then you already should be preparing now. The 1st of January next year, when this will actually be enforced, is not very far away. But of course, you don't necessarily know if you are a critical infrastructure provider. You have a good idea, but it could be anyone, because you can be chosen and designated by the new commissioner or by any of the designated authorities. They can decide that you are. You will be named and you'll be notified that you are a critical infrastructure provider and you are subject to the law. Now, people will be being notified as time goes on. I was chatting to some people at the weekend. They don't know yet if their organisation has been. But as I said, if you are in something that you think is fundamental to life in Hong Kong, there's a good chance you will be. But you need to be preparing now. You need to be getting ready now. You need to be checking your systems are key. I'm hopeful, fairly hopeful, that in the majority of cases that those who are operating critical infrastructure are already doing the things that are required by the law. But if you're not, you need to get your ducks in order. You need to make sure that you're in a position where you can make sure that if you're called to answer what's something that's gone wrong, you can answer to it. The other thing is that it covers the systems. It covers systems that are essentially, this is a weird one. Not only does it just cover systems in Hong Kong, but anything that is accessible from Hong Kong relevant to critical infrastructure. This suggests that actually if you're overseas, you have something overseas, but it's accessible from Hong Kong, it's important to Hong Kong, you could still be caught in some way by this new law. Now, this hasn't really been fleshed out. We don't really know what this means, but it makes you wonder whether things like social media companies could also find themselves part of that. I would argue that they are pretty much critical infrastructure. If you think about it, social media is now the main way that we communicate. So communications authorities certainly would be interested. But again, we're going to have to see how that plays out. Now, there's a lot of work to be done, but the big thing is you don't know that you are essentially a provider of critical infrastructure until you are notified as such. And the other weird thing, in my view, but I can see why they've done it, is that there will be no published list. We will not be told who is a provider of critical infrastructure. Only the organisation itself will know. It's not being made public. And the reason for this, the justification for this, is because they fear that it would make it a target. You know who to attack if you wanted to bring down Hong Kong. Fair enough with that. I can see where they're coming from. But again, it's weird that you don't know till you're tapped on the shoulder by a regulator. So I imagine there's a lot of organisations in Hong Kong who are on the borderline of they don't know if they're critical or not, wondering what's going to happen next. I suppose there's also a number of people thinking whether there'll be another designated authority on top of the HKMA and on top of the Communications Authority, who may actually be another one. We may find other elements, other regulators in Hong Kong making sure that essentially we are protected against cyber attacks and losing critical systems. So you've got time to prepare. There's so much to be said on this. I'll be giving talks. I've already given one. If people want my slides on that, I'll send them to you. It's on the bill before it came into law, but very little change between the bill and the law, I have to say. Maybe there might be some changes before it actually comes into force, but we'll see. But if you are in an organisation up in that, then give me a shout, give me a call. I'm happy to talk you through it in more detail, tell you what you should be doing now, tell you what we think of and what the potential problems and hazards are. These regulators that have been brought in, both the Communications Authority and the HKMA, are very much well experienced in regulating their respective authorities. I've dealt with and worked with all of them, and they are very good at what they do. But we'll see who the new commissioner is going to be and how when he or she is appointed, what they will do, whether they'll be very proactive. I am expecting that they will be. So we'll see. This is a whole new world for Hong Kong because, as I said, our data laws, we're a very, very laissez-faire economy. A laissez-faire economy is the point that people don't really bother about data breaches. But now this is going to change. And also, if you look at what happened in China, where they had a cybersecurity law similar to this law, then a data protection law, which was very much about the data security law was very much about protecting critical data within China, sort of state secrets. But then the personal information protection law, which was sort of their version of the GDPR, then this could be the first of many. We could have at least 2 more data protection laws, which will revolutionize the way that data works in Hong Kong. And frankly, I think it's well overdue, and I think it's something that we very much need. Anyway, I will give if people want me to, I'll give a much more detailed talk with slides rather than me just talking to a camera. I've had to do all of this from memory, which is often a bit of a challenge. But I hope you're having a good one. And if you are a critical infrastructure provider, get ready for it. It's going to be an exciting time. And if you need a hand, let me know. You know where I am. That's it for now. Hope you have a good one. I'll see you soon. Take care.